So welcome to curl 8.14.0. This is actually recording take two because I just broke down when I did it the first time and now I'm doing it again. And I am Daniel Stenberg. I work for wolfSSL. That's my website. That's my Mastodon account. That's my photo of my workplace over there. At least how it looked like a few years ago. So welcome. This is release 267 of curl. We've been doing this for a while. 27 years, about 20, so roughly 10 a year on average. And this time around, we have had help from a lot of people, 91 contributors, of course, 48 of them new. So quite a lot of newbies, a lot of people in total. All the names are in the thanks file in the Git repository. Out of those 91 contributors, 37 wrote patches that we have merged into Git. And out of those 37, 17 authors were totally new. And we are approaching 1400. So in a couple of more releases, we should reach that number. So we're certainly a whole bunch of people helping out here, and that's awesome. That's what makes curl what it is. Thank you everyone who makes it possible. This time around, we have had a complete release cycle, which means that it's exactly 56 days since the previous release, 8 full weeks. You know, we do releases on Wednesdays. This is 56 days ago. We did the previous release, the 8.13.0, and now we're 14. So 9,931 days since we released the first curl version, approaching the 10,000 day mark in August, I believe. We do a lot of things in curl. We have command line options in the tool. This time around, we can boast that we have exactly 269 command line options. They're all documented and counted in. And we have one more in this release than in previous releases. We have the same amount of public libcurl functions in the API, 96 of them. And we have one more curl easy setup options than previous releases, 308 of them. These are numbers that just keep slowly, they keep being increased over time, slowly and gradually, because we don't remove the old ones, right? Because we keep the ABIs, and we don't break users in the tool. This time around, I think we could and should put some particular focus and concentration on the 2 security advisories, and maybe particularly we should think about who's actually affected or not. But anyway, bear with me, they are slightly complicated here, but the first one is the quick certificate check skip with wolfSSL. This is an accidental skipping the certificate check when we connect to a quick server with curl, and curl is built to use the wolfSSL TLS backend. Quick, as you might remember, is the alternative to TLS and TCP, and it's used for HTTP3 connections only in curl right now. So it is only for HTTP3 and only for curl using wolfSSL, and only when connecting to host name specified as an IP address and not using a host name. And that's how this mistake managed to sort of get in there, because it was a mistake. And if all those combinations are true, curl could then skip the certificate check and move on as if the check has been done, and the user wouldn't notice if there would be an imposter and a man in the middle attack. We consider this a severity medium flaw. We call it CVE 2025-4947. It was reported by Hiroki Kurosawa, and he is rewarded $2,500 for this awesome finding. Yep. And of course, read up about all the details on our advisory page and on the curl website, because all the details are there, everything you need to know and everything you want to know. And a very sort of slightly similar flaw found by the same guy, we call it CVE 255025, and this is also for a curl with the wolfSSL TLS backend, and also doing quick. But in this case, we just forgot to do the certificate pinning check. So a different check was skipped. So in this case, we have a feature that it basically allows a user to pin a public uh, key of the server. So basically verify that it's still the same server over there. And it works perfectly fine when using the regular TLS over TCP used for HTTP1 and HTTP2. But if you would use HTTP3 instead, and it would use Quick for that, curl will just move on as if the check was true and validated, but in reality, it wasn't checked at all. So by doing that, curl would then could mistakenly miss if there was an imposter or a man in the middle person there instead of your actual server. So again, a quick build to use Wolf SSL flaw. Again, a medium severity one, and as I mentioned, also discovered by Hiroki, rewarded $2,500. So awesome findings, and it proves that our bug bounty works really well. Apart from those two security advisories and changes, associated changes, we have a bunch of changes done this time that might be fun to just go through and think about a little bit. So, for example, if you're doing MQTT with curl, which a lot of people don't say, what? Curl does MQTT? Yes, it does. Since a few years back, it does MQTT. And if you do MQTT, you can sometimes have rather long-standing connections. And if those connections would be idle for a long time, routers or NAS and everything could consider those connections to be dead and close them. And one way to overcome that is that curl now sends a ping to the server and expects a pong back so that it'll just exercise the connection a little bit, which helps your long-standing connections to actually survive and remain long-standing connections. We improved S-channel handling for client certificates with the PKCS12 format. Now you can put the CA cert in the file, which just makes it more handy. We have one new setup option that I mentioned previously, and the corresponding command line option called, well, the set opt option is then, as you can see on the screen, curl opt SSL signature algorithms, and the command line option is slightly shorter to say because it's --sig algs, and you specify which signature algorithms you want for the TLS handshake. Read up about it if this is interesting to you. It's only supported by the OpenSSL TLS backend so far. So yeah, we introduce support for the new OpenSSL 3.5 or 3.5.0 introduces a new API to do quick with OpenSSL, and we use that API. So now you can enable that. You can enable doing quick with this NGTCP2 and NGHTTP3 and this new OpenSSL quick API coming in OpenSSL 3.5.0. It has some bugs in there and they have been reported to OpenSSL. So I'm not sure it's going to be rock solid yet, but it's going to be a excellent way to get HTTP3 support using the stock OpenSSL going forward. We are looking at, this is the first curl release, curl tarball curl that in which we bundle the wcurl script. Wcurl being a dedicated effort to provide a script that is a convenient shortcut, handy tool to just download one or a bunch of URLs without having to remember any command line options, basically. So write wcurl and then provide the URLs and it'll download them for you. Yes, and the idea here by bundling, as we are bundling it with the curl in the curl release here, it's not we don't expect it to change much going forward, but here it is. And by bundling it wcurl in here, we hope that it will be available and getting provided to more users, and it'll be more widely available and used by people. And the sixth change for this release to mention is that we have added an option that allows users to disable auto-pong when doing WebSocket connections with curl. So basically that allows the user, the application, to manage the ping pongs instead of curl doing it automatically. Uh, well, it's actually the pong it manages, or you can disable the pong so that the application doing the WebSocket has to do the ponging instead. Pong being the response to a ping from the server when the server just wants to make sure that the client is still alive. And apart from them, the 2 security advisories, the 6 changes, we have about 229 bug fixes mentioned and listed for this release. So you should really go to the changelog and read up about the details if there's anything specific you want to learn or figure out about this. So here are some of my favorite ones for this time around, or some of those I think are worthy to highlight. So, for example, we now have a maximum number of response headers that we think is reasonable to accept from in a single transfer, really. So, if actually if a transfer being then one response actually and the number of redirects. So if you hit that maximum number of headers, curl will consider it more of a malicious attack or some kind of mistake or badness. And I think then the maximum number is set to 5,000 headers right now. We'll see how that works. Maybe we need to bump that a little bit, but it's still an excessive amount because most HTTP responses only have a sort of 10, 20 or so. So 5,000 should be plenty. We also have a better error message now when curl detects an illegal response header, because previously it would actually have a very mysterious error message that made users scratch their heads and what does it mean? Why does it say this? Well, it was only just a weird server or a broken server, or even in some cases you would connect to something that wasn't even HTTP and it was now it's slightly more helpful. We fixed pausing transfers is a magic art here, but and that's one of these areas of functionality that keeps haunting us, and we keep having sort of to tweak and improve things, and we did it again now. So when you pause and unpause streams, in particular when you have multiple streams and transfers going on at the same time, and you pause one of them, yeah, we made it a little bit better this time. We did some mistakes about which HTTP versions to allow through the alt service negotiation. So now we should make sure to only allow the HTTP versions that we actually are built to support, and none of the others. And we had a really big overhaul and refactor and polish of the AWS SIG v4 support, which is this. I, I can say that it is a weird thing, but it's an AWS standard and it's widely used. So we support it with curl, and it's complicated. And now it's slightly better. We have a bunch of new test cases, and yeah, it was a real overhaul here. So it should be better now. Try it out. Moving on, lots of fixes, right? We did actually. I think we did a few different fixes for the threaded resolver. Basically, that's the default way we do name resolving in curl. Basically, curl starts a helper thread, and in that helper thread, we do the name resolving calls. And once done, we send the results back to the main thread. That's the threaded resolver. And we have done some general refactors in this area over the last couple of releases, and now we did some more fixes, so it should be even better than before. Some people reported some obscure problems. And a while ago, I fixed the so-called curl get line function in libcurl to make sure that it would handle reading from files better, or reading individual lines from files better. Basically, fget_s done slightly better, and a better, more dynamic buffer handling. But it was such a stupid mistake, because if there would be a file with exactly the size of the buffer that I used for this function, it would do it wrong. It would misbehave. So I think that if you had a file that was exactly 128 bytes, it would misbehave and do it wrongly. And no, we didn't test exactly 128 bytes in the test suite, but now we do, and now it works. We now provide a better error message. Back again to error messages, right? So now we provide better error messages if you try to do the curl easy setup, and you provide an option that curl doesn't. No, you provide an argument to one of the options where curl returns bad function argument, and now it helps you to just provide more information about which option that actually says this. Other tiny tweaks, we support the accept for function call if available, which it is in all modern Linuxes at least. We also support the pipe2 function on those systems where we use pipe, which we only use in a very limited amount of systems because nowadays we try to use event FD instead of pipe. So most systems really shouldn't use pipe2 either. But if you don't have event FD and your system is a pipe system, you could now use pipe2, which has a bunch of more flags in the function invoke that just makes it slightly more efficient. We have this URL API in curl, as I hope you know, or in libcurl, and that API has a feature that allows you to do a redirect, set a URL, and then redirect to another URL, right? It helps you manage sort of how would a redirect work on this URL plus this relative URL. And when redirecting to a empty URL, just quote, nothing in it, that would return an error because why would you do that? That's like, why? But it appears that several documents and several redirect handlers out there are actually saying this should work. So now it works. Now you can do that with the curl URL API as well. And of course, it doesn't change the URL. So basically, yeah, yeah, well, it was an easy fix. Another stupid mistake we did in the URL API is that we have this cool feature that we call it puny to IDN, which is if you're not into this terminology, it doesn't tell you anything. But Punycode is the ASCII version of the international domain name. So basically, if you provide an international domain name, like using some Asian letters or something in your domain name, to resolve that to actually get the IP address for that host name, you have to convert it to an ASCII version. That conversion converts from IDN, the international version, to Punycode, which is sort of the ASCII version. And so Puny to IDN is the API version that we have that converts back from the Punycode back to the international domain name version, because that's a feature of the libcurl URL API. And that was a little bit, it had too many checks, so it actually would sometimes not do the conversion correctly. Now it works better, and now we have test cases for them too. We had some other minor flaws around the receive message syscall for doing quick on some more esoteric TCP stacks where it would work more like the old BSD. I don't remember the exact details here, but we polished it to work better in a more portable fashion. when using WebSocket, you can, since WebSocket is sort of, you upgrade, you change to WebSocket, but you start out with HTTP and then you sort of upgrade that connection into WebSocket. But since that's an HTTP first, you can do things like replace a lot of headers in that initial HTTP request. And in that initial HTTP request, you can then add headers, replace headers, blah, 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 as regular with curl. But there were some flaws in the header replace mechanics when you did that in WebSocket upgrade thing. And now it works better. For some reason, we do a lot of checks, not checks, tests in libcurl or in curl project in general, right? We have thousands of tests. We build hundreds of CI jobs in different build combinations, different backends, different combinations of features and third-party libraries. And we, of course, built several builds using libSSH for SSH protocols, SFTP and SCP. But for some reason, we did not, we accidentally did not run one of those tests, one of those jobs with Valgrind in the libSSH, sorry, in the libSSH test job. So we actually did not discover this memory leak, which has been there for a while. It wasn't big, it wasn't bad, but it was there. It's been there for a while. And of course, the second we discovered it, we fixed it. So no biggie. Now it's gone. We had some minor sort of just logic mistakes. So if you would just use embed TLS and you didn't ask for any particular maximum TLS version to support, I mean, you just went with the default, then it would typically set 1.2 as the maximum supported TLS version by mistake. So you would probably you would have to manually ask for TLS 1.3 as the maximum version to support for it to negotiate the TLS 1.3, which is a mistake because that's not how it works with other TLS backends, and that's not how it's supposed to work with curl. So now, if you build with a modern embed TLS, one that is released within the last few years or so, I think I don't remember the version numbers, then now it should negotiate 1.3 perfectly fine. So we have this script called mkCA bundle, which is it generates a CA cert in bundle in the PEM format, and it does this by getting the Mozilla collection of CA certs, and you can go to the curl website. There we have that also hosted, the converted file, the CA extract page. So we provide that as a service, but you can also run this particular script yourself if you don't want to trust our service and you would just want to do it yourself or whatever, for whatever reason. And this script now gets that Mozilla data from the GitHub URLs instead of the previous mozilla.org URLs, because Mozilla and the entire Firefox development, they have switched over to GitHub now. So that's now that's the origin of these files, of this data. So it seemed more accurate to get it from that place. We have this is not really a bug fix in the tool, maybe, but this is in the system, maybe, that we're now detecting and check a lot non-ASCII characters in CI and in scripting to make sure that we don't accidentally have weirdo Unicode characters. I wrote a blog post about this, but basically it's sometimes hard to detect if something is replaced by a weirdo Unicode lookalike character, and now it's really hard to do that without us noticing it by this CI job that really checks for Unicode and UTF-8 symbols. I discovered that we have this header called typecheck gcc.h. Okay, so basically, since we have a vararg function calls in libcurl, several of them actually, in particular curl easy setup, which sets an option, and all those options have a corresponding argument, and that argument can be a different type depending on the option. So we have a lot of options setting a long, we have a lot of options setting a char pointer, and so on. So when you build your code and you're using these function calls, a typical compiler cannot really verify the type of the argument because it varies depending on the option. And since they're vararg in C, the compiler can't check the type. So we have this fancy special header called typecheck GCC that adds this type check, because this header knows which kind of type it should be. So it uses magic checks in GCC language. It works with Clang as well. Anyway, so it's really useful, and it really helps. But we did discover that it didn't really work. It wasn't sort of, for some reason, at some point, some changes have happened in the compiler lands that made them not work anymore. And we didn't test this properly in the test suite. So one of these days I noticed, well, they don't actually work. They don't actually detect mistakes. So I fixed them. I added them to the test suite. I made sure that this file now verifies all options. And we're also using this internally now, so we actually found mistakes internally too. But this really helps most applications to make sure that you use the correct type of the argument to curl's easy setup options. I suspect this particular change might be one that will uh, trigger some compiler warnings in some projects out there. Okay, going forward, there was another memory leak in if you use this is fun. If you used -h in a curl config file, it will leak some memory, a few hundred bytes, I think. But I mean, okay, why would you use -h in a config file? That doesn't make any sense. It's not really a usable way to do it. But still, someone, of course, ran a fuzzer and they added this, and now we fixed it. And the exact same problem I mentioned with the curl getLine function in libcurl, since we had pretty much the same function in the tool source code. Of course, when I copy and pasted one solution into the others, I got the exact same error. So we had this exact same fix in both sides. So that's the 128 bytes I mentioned. So when you ask curl, the command line tool, to retry a failed transfer, --retry, it'll just try to do it again if some conditions sort of match. And if you would then save it to a file, if you would do a file sort of download to a particular destination, and curl would say, hey, the conditions are correct, we should retry this transfer, curl would truncate that file and start over the transfer so that it wouldn't just append it, because if you had added 22 bytes and you would restart the transfer, it shouldn't save the original 22 bytes. You would get them again. So curl would truncate that file. That's perfectly fine. But if that file was not a regular file, if you would like save to dev null, curl would still try to truncate dev null, and you would get some error messages and other unfortunate things. So now we make sure that we only try to truncate regular files. We had this whole brouhaha about AI contributions, in particular in security reports to curl, and now we have a whole new section in the contribute document about AI use in curl, in particular when you contribute issues, security reports, pull requests, and doing translations. Could be fun to read up if you plan to contribute to curl and you think and you want to use AI in that combination. Sort of in combination with my fixes of that header file that checks curl easy setup options better, I found a lot of problems in existing documentation and in these examples. And I also made sure that our checks of the examples we provide, I think there's like 130 sort of full size, they're standalone examples using libcurl doing different tasks. And now they're all built completely warning free, even when we enable all the picky compiler options and verifies all the arguments, etc. So they're just better libcurl users now. Okay, so test improvements, lots of test improvements this time around. And of course, we keep adding tests, and we don't mention that, but we keep polishing and improving the test suite. So now we run the PyTests in parallel. So if you run the PyTest part of they'll just complete on modern machines much faster. I mean, maybe magnitude, more speed. We have this new option that makes run tests retry options, and is as a way to reduce flakiness, in particular in CI. So now CI tests run, they end up green a little bit more than they did before. We have added this new DNS server for basic DNS tests in the test suite. So now we can do more, fake responses when you resolve host names, and it'll help us to verify code paths better that we previously couldn't test, and we can also add tests for for HTTPS RR and things like that going forward. This is just the beginning of a whole family of new tests that we can do. We also, in this cycle, cleaned up how we do test servers. We have a lot of test servers for test purposes, and they are now much simpler because we have sort of try not to sort of split out, make them not use libcurl code as much, so that they'll just be simpler to maintain, simpler to write, and simpler to understand. And they don't use string comparison, and they don't use libcurl printf functions. Pretty convenient, or just nicer, so just better compartmentalized things, and not sort of much cross infected things. And related to the UTF-8 Unicode things I talked about a few slides ago, we now make sure that we provide all non-ASCII test data as hex encoded. So basically, we avoid using UTF-8 characters in test cases, just to make sure that we understand exactly what they are, so that we don't get fooled by them looking like something else. So they're now provided hex encoded in test cases, because we have these formatters of functions to provide them hex encoded instead. Okay, the downside is then that we then have hex or more binary code in the test cases, but they're still small pieces. They're not big chunks of binary data, because we should never have big chunks of binary data anywhere in the Git repository. Okay, so those were some of the interesting bug fixes this time around. And in the project, we're of course always working on removing things that people are not using, and sort of dead end things in the project, and related stuff. So heads up, in June, which is just a few days off, right? We will remove support for two TLS backends. They're called Bare SSL and Secure Transport. We will remove support completely, because they don't support TLS 103, and they are sort of dead ends. And we're going to help users to do better TLS, and we will remove complexity internally and everything. Just make our lives easier by cutting out those, or cutting out the support for them. That's a negative 5,000 line patch pending to get merged. The month after that, in July, that's also, not too far away in time, we're going to remove support for the MSH3, HTTP3 backend. This might not be as sort of revolutionary. It might not hurt that many users, because this is a backend for HTTP3 that hasn't really worked in curl for a long time, and it hasn't really advanced anyway. And we have other really capable, really good HTTP3 backends, so we have not seen any really good reason to keep support for this around. So it'll go in July, And I should just also repeat this, that everything I say here about pending removals, we can still revert these decisions in case of, proper demand and proper attention, or if there, shows up a dozen of developers who want to work on this, then we could discuss going another route. But this is still the plan for now. Later than this year, in the fall, we are going to remove support for the so-called WinBuild system. The WinBuild system is a particular build system for Windows. It's called WinBuild because that's the name of the directory in the curl Git repository. It is basically a way to build curl using nmake with using Visual Studio. And we want to reduce the number of ways you build curl to make it easier to support the different build systems we support. So basically remove the multitude and focus, and so make sure, and it allows us to focus on the few and make them really, really good. So people who are using WinBuild, we have a transition path for them. They should do this. They should read up exactly how to switch from WinBuild to generating the files using CMake instead. And the transition path is documented and explained. So go read up about it if you're a WinBuild user. In November 2025, still a few months away, we will remove support for first Windows CE, And then drop support for building curl using Visual Studio 2008. We basically, they're somewhat related because we have kept the support for the 2008 build system because that's a common way to build Windows CE. And Windows CE has been out of end of life since a few years back, even the extended version of that. And we basically estimate that there are so few users. And again, if there are any users, they should really consider stepping up and maybe paying for support. And then maybe we could do something for them. But until then, we're going to keep this plan to remove the support. And of course, we remove support primarily because it makes our lives simpler, right? Because of stuff that makes things complicated. It's harder for us to write code to keep support for Windows CE because Windows CE, I mean, Windows in general is a weird OS to support, but Windows CE is next level weird. So it makes our lives slightly easier when we remove support for those. Okay, so as I mentioned, we do releases every 8 weeks, and the next release is likely to become 8.15.0 if nothing bad has happened in this release and we need to do a patch release. And it'll be 15.0, the .0 release, because we will most probably do some new changes, some new features, and then we do .0 releases. And some of the things that we might do in the pending next release, well, because we have a bunch of things that we want to do. Some are planned and some are just going to show up without me knowing about them right now or thinking about them to mention them to you right now. So we have this ongoing sort of side project and to reduce complexity in curl, and this is going forward. And by this I mean basically we measure the complexity of curl functions, and then we get a score, and we work on reducing that score for functions. Basically, make smaller functions easier to read functions to make curl easier to manage for everyone, for the benefit of everyone. So ideally, hopefully, make it harder to do mistakes. We will still do mistakes, but they ideally will be sort of we will increase readability and understandability of this curl source code. There's work on providing a alt service fallback, which is the way that when you ask curl to support alt service as this header, when a server can say, hey, you can contact me over here on the other host name port protocol version for a while. Um, when that other connection fails, we don't have a proper fallback to go back to the original host name, which is a flaw and annoying to users. We have work on that coming. We have this actually rather long going PR that we should go back and revisit. And the discussion is really around naming here. What should the option be called? What should the arguments to this option be called? Because it'll change how curl does redirect following, in particular when you do HTTP methods that have a request body like a post or the new query method and stuff like that, possibly put. So if that's stuff you're interested in, go look up that PR, read up and tell us what you think and how we can really polish that to become really good. I hope there's going to be more work on the HTTPS RR going forward. It's a complicated DNS record and there's more to do there. And we have this new PR in progress as well for flushing a connection cache. The theory here being that if you're using an application and you have one particular network setup, perhaps maybe you're having a mobile phone or a laptop or something, and you have one particular, you do a lot of connections in one network environment place, and maybe you change your Wi-Fi to another Wi-Fi, or you change from Wi-Fi to Ethernet or something like that, and then you all those existing connections that are there present because you had a lot of transfers already, suddenly all of those connections are probably, they're more or less dead because they're holding on to a server through a dead network interface perhaps, or over connection that is gone. So when the network has changed big enough, you want to just flash that and or signal to curl. Never mind those, don't reuse them again. Consider them dead. Start up new connections for all subsequent new requests. That's basically what this PR is about. It's being worked on. Hopefully, ideally, it'll be merged and in there for the next release. So I also this side sort of related sister tool called TrueRel was also released in a new version the other day. I just wanted to highlight that. So if you wanna do parsing of URLs, extracting components, updating URLs, etc. in shell scripts, TrueRel is really your friend, and it really then works in combination with curl. In particular, if you write shell scripts or even command lines, if you wanna fiddle with URLs and then pass them to curl maybe or vice versa or whatever. TrueRel is really your friend when it comes to URL manipulations, updating. So today is May 28th, and we did this particular curl release. And the next one is planned to happen on July 16, which is if as you count your math immediately, you can say that, wait, that's not 8 weeks, that's 7 weeks. And that's correct because we have tweaked the release cycle a little bit this time. But anyway, that's the date, that's the target date for the next release, unless we do a patch one before, but let's cross our fingers and hope that we don't. So that's the updated release notes URL for everything that will happen in the meantime. So whenever you want to know what's planned for the next release, you go there and check it out and it'll contain that. So the normal 8 weeks release cycle that this time then is just 7 weeks, but it works like this. So it's today, it's release Wednesday. So I did a release. Then we have this 10 days cooldown period, which means we don't merge features and changes, we just merge bug fixes. And this is a period to possibly detect regressions and stay on alert and have a high attention on what people report, because if there's something bad reported during this period, and in particular in the beginning of this period, we can do an optional patch release to just fix the worst problems we accidentally did in this .0 release. Hopefully, ideally, we don't. And then we have a feature Saturday, it says it's a Saturday, and we at the feature Saturday we open the release, the feature window, and we have a feature window open for in a regular case 3 weeks, exactly 21 days. In this case, since we're shortening it with 1 week, it's just going to be 14 days. And during this feature window, we merge and allow merging of new features, changes that are sort of adding things that are not just bug fixes. And then we have this freeze Saturday because it's exactly 3 weeks after we open the window. We close the window again. It's a Saturday again. And then, of course, yes, when we close the feature window, that means that we start the feature freeze, and then we don't do any new features. We only do bug fixes for 25 days. And recently we also introduced the concept that on that freeze Saturday, when we say, hey, no more features for this cycle, we also release a release candidate called RC1, and then we wait another 9 days, and then we do a release candidate 2, and then we wait another 9 days and we do a release candidate 3. That's exactly 7 days before we do the next release, which is then the release Wednesday again. So on and on, round and round and round. This is the release cycle we do all the time, and it never ends. Sometimes it's not an 8 week, sometimes it's a 7 week, but 8 week is the goal and the intention here, and that's what we aim for. If you are using curl or want to use curl in a commercial surrounding and you need help, support, whatever, hand-holding, advice, I don't know what, get in touch and we'll be happy to help you. I'm the primary support person at WoodFSSL for curl, of course, and this is the way I do all my commercial curl business. So anything commercial with curl, get in touch and we'll help you out. If you have find any bugs, issues, problems, typos, things you don't agree with, you think we should fix, improve, file an issue. We work really hard on addressing them as soon as we can and as good as we can. But in order to do that, we need to know about the problems. So tell us about the problems. You don't assume that we already know, because in many cases we don't. And similarly, if you have or suspect a security problem in curl, and you think we should do something about it, tell us about it on hackerone.com/curl. They are then confidential and hidden until we publish them. So we can have a conversation about them in secret until we confirm them or dismiss them. And if you use an AI to find a problem, make sure that you verify the problem properly before you tell us about them, because the AIs, they like to make things up. And I, of course, in particular want to highlight the set of top sponsors we have in the curl project, because they are certainly the ones that help us make this possible. And they tend to be the same set of companies every release, and they are the same good companies as the previous release. So thank you, sponsors, for making curl possible. So this was everything I wanted to say for you this time, and thanks for you who really endured this second recording of the same thing for at least a second beginning. So this is curl 8.14.0, and see you again in another release presentation. Bye.